My name is Sven Lindblad, and I am in South Carolina. And I'm speaking today with Enric Sala, who is in Washington, D.C., who heads up a program, who's the visionary behind a program called Pristine Seas, which he's led since, I think, 2008, uh, whose mission it is to go around the world, identify places that have significant value from ocean value, environments that are important in the ocean, to understand them, document them, and then use that information to lobby governments to create large marine protected areas. Just give us a quick overview of Pristine Seas from the perspective of its core mission.
Yeah, thank you, Sven, for having this chat with me on Earth Day. I'd rather be on one of your boats with you. But yeah, I have to say for everybody here that when I used to be a professor at the University of California at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and my work was studying the impacts of humans in the ocean, impacts of fishing, global warming. And one day I realized that all I was doing was writing the obituary of the ocean. And that was not satisfactory enough. So I quit academia and went to National Geographic to propose a crazy idea, which was, let's go to the wildest places left in the ocean and let's save them before it's too late. And I have to thank you again, Sven, because when I went to meet and present, make a PowerPoint presentation with the idea to the executives of National Geographic Society, you came from New York to support me. Do you remember?
I do remember.
You came, and that carried a lot of weight because National Geographic has always had you in high value, high esteem, really respects you. So that was the beginning. And the original idea was to go to a place, do scientific research, film it, and then convince the powers that be to protect the area. That was as much as we knew at that point. And over time, we have developed a method that includes scientific research, economic analysis, community relations, policy discussions, strategic communications, including media, to convince, to inspire leaders of countries that own these places to protect them. And in the last 12 years now, we have been to 31 of these places, and we got 22 already protected, from the Arctic to Antarctica through the tropics. And the total area protected is almost 6 million square kilometers, which for reference is about over half the size of the United States.
And you use something which I'd love for you to expound upon a little bit, because I've always found it very compelling as a form of communication, where you look upon the ocean as a bank account where we are constantly withdrawing funds but not investing in the principle. So I find that an incredibly compelling way to describe this whole scenario.
Yeah, sure. So today, about 7% of the ocean is in areas that have been designated or proposed as protected areas. But only 2.5% of the ocean is fully protected from fishing, mining, oil drilling, and other extractive activities. And if we think about that, 97% of the ocean is open to fishing. And today, 2/3 of the fish stocks are experiencing overfishing, which means that we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. So that 97% of the ocean that is open to fishing is like a bank account where we withdraw, everybody withdraws, but nobody makes a deposit. But these areas that are fully protected, these no-take areas, are like the principle that we set aside that produces returns. So what are these returns? And what we have seen with our research and other research around the world is that when you protect an area from fishing, the fish abundance, the fish biomass, the tons of fish per hectare, increases on average by 600% relative to the areas nearby. And not only the fish are more abundant inside these reserves, but they are also larger. And when they are larger, they grow fatter and they produce a disproportionately larger number of eggs. So these reserves are fish banks. They produce a disproportionately larger amount of eggs and larvae that together with part of the adult fish are going to spill over the boundaries of these marine protected areas and help to replenish the fisheries around. But also what we have seen is that when the fish come back, the divers come in. And fish, as you know very well, Sven, people go to places where they can see something that they cannot see at home. Divers want to go to places where there are actually fish. So these marine protected areas, the ones that are well protected and managed, attract a great amount of interest, and they bring in a lot of tourism revenue and good jobs.
You did some very interesting work on the value of sharks alive versus sharks dead in the Galapagos. I'd love for you to tell people a little bit about that.
Yeah, we were trying to. So once, I, my partner Christian and I went to the Galapagos with a bunch of friends on one of your ships, hoping to have a vacation, and just relax and enjoy nature instead of trying to worry about it all the time. So we were there and had a fantastic time, but we heard from local scientists that most of the marine reserve was open to fishing, and that sharks weren't going down, the grouper numbers were going down, there was overfishing. So then we decided, oh man, we can never go to a place and just enjoy it. We always have to think about the problems and ocean conservation. So partnering with locals and the Ecuadorian government, we thought about, okay, what can we show so people realize the benefits of protecting more of the waters of Galapagos versus continue overexploiting them. And we looked at this wonderful place in the north of the archipelago. There are two islands that few people go to, Darwin and Wolf. These places are the sharkiest places on the planet, the largest abundance of sharks, hammerhead sharks, whale sharks. It's an extraordinary place, as you know, Sven. And we knew that there had been shark fishing in the Galapagos, some intentional, some unintentional. And we saw this crazy situation where you have divers going there for the sharks, to see the sharks, and then fishermen next to the diving boats actually catching fish and sometimes some sharks. So we looked at what is the value of a shark alive versus dead. And what we found was that if you kill the shark and sell it to the Chinese middlemen in Ecuador, in Manta, that fisherman will get $200 for the fins, mostly. But if you leave the shark live, that shark can live for 30, 40 years. And over the course of its life, the average shark will bring $5.3 million to the Ecuadorian economy, to the Galapagos Islands through ecotourism. So there you go. A dead shark, $200. You can sell it only once. A living shark, you can sell it every day for 30 years to tourists that are going to go there to see it and photograph it. And you can get more than $5 million from that same shark. So, I mean, from a rational perspective, from an economic perspective, it is a no-brainer to keep these sharks alive in the water.
So for everyone listening, this is a particularly salient sort of argument, because at the end of the day, we need to reframe the discussion about what constitutes value, alive or dead, dead or alive. We know that phrase. We've seen it in movies, but and that's a perfect example that alive is clearly far more valuable than dead. It's interesting. Today we are celebrating Earth Day, April 22nd, 50th anniversary. And I'm kind of wondering what was your moment where your world and your thought and the passion that you have for this subject just emerged?
It was watching documentaries on TV. There were two men who really inspired me. One was Jacques Cousteau, of course, who showed us all this amazing underwater life. But growing up in the Mediterranean in the early 70s, as a little kid, I would go in the sea and see nothing. And it was the moment where I did my first scuba dive at the Marine Reserve on the Medes Islands in Catalonia, north of Spain, that I realized when I jumped in the Marine Reserve and saw the abundance of fish there, I realized what we had lost everywhere else, right? So the contrast between my childhood, where I couldn't see a fish bigger than my mask, and that marine reserve where there were huge fish that were big groupers, closer to what Cousteau had shown us. That was the moment where I realized everything we had lost in the ocean. But there was another man, very inspirational, called Felix Rodriguez de la Fuente. He was a doctor who decided never to work as a doctor, and he became as a falcon trainer. And he had an amazing voice. He was a storyteller like nobody else has seen in Spain. And he had a program on TV called El Hombre y la Tierra, Man and Earth. And he filmed in the 70s for the first time the intimate life of the big animals that were about to disappear in Spain, like the wolf, the brown bear, the otter, the golden eagle, etc., etc. And he basically instilled a love for nature in all of us, my entire generation. And he's one of these rare people who, you don't need to say the whole name. You just say Felix. If you say Felix in Spain, everybody knows who that person was, right? So it was these two passionate men, obsessed, one about land animals, the other one about the ocean, that made me fall in love with nature and made me realize everything that we're losing. And since I was a little kid, I decided that I wanted to become an ocean explorer.
That's so interesting. Because I think everyone who's listening to this, you might want to think about that. What was your moment where something transformational happened that completely redirected your life and gave you the passion to pursue whatever it is? I was thinking, Enric, I try not to think about it too much because it really gets very, very depressing. And I don't know how much people think about this, but the degree of the number of livelihoods that are being lost at the moment as a consequence of this virus and the implications that will have are almost incalculable. I had a conversation yesterday by email. There's a school in the Galapagos that we've supported for 12 years now called Thomas de Berlanga. Mm-hmm. By the way, if anyone's listening to this that would like to have a conversation about how to help this, I would love to have the conversation. So Thomas de Berlanga is a private school that we believed back when it started would be the stepping stone for the leaders of Galapagos into the future. It had a very intelligent curriculum. It was based on nature. It was relevant to the lives of the people that were there. It was not some sort of abstract sort of thing that had nothing to do with their existence. Most of the classrooms are outside. There's a total connection with nature. 70% of the parents of the students there are connected with the tourism industry, and the tourism industry is dead, and they have no income, so they cannot afford to pay tuition, and there isn't enough of a base to cover the costs. And so that school is going to close this week for a period of time, which is such a tragedy. But it's a tragedy that's being repeated in thousands and thousands of places around the world. We focus on businesses, big businesses, small businesses, whatever we can identify. But it's almost like whatever we can identify, there are like 100 things or 1,000 things that we aren't identifying that are equally problematic or more so. So this is a kind of a mess, which I guess brings me to a question about, from the perspective of your work, Enric, how has COVID-19 affected what you're doing?
Well, in different ways. One is, we cannot go out. We cannot do our expeditions. We cannot conduct new scientific research. We cannot produce new films. We cannot work with local communities to help protect these areas, so these areas can help them have better livelihoods through tourism inside the protected areas and better fishing around, right? So this year we had 4 expeditions planned with our Pristine Seas program. We did one to the Patagonian fjords south of Chile, and that's it. I don't think we'll be able to go anywhere else for the rest of the year. So that means that 3 new areas that we targeted for protection will have to wait 1 year, 2 years, who knows for how long. At the same time, we know that in some places, like in the Mediterranean, fishing pressure has gone down. There are less people going out to fish in Europe, for example, because the restaurants are closed, right? Bars are closed, and all the supply chain for the hospitality business, which was the main source of revenue for these fishermen, is not operating. So there has been this reduction in pressure, but in other places, we know that some of the tuna fisheries in the Pacific have been asking for going out without observers on board, because they argue that it's better if observers are not on board because they could get infected with the virus if some sailor has it, etc. So they are already asking for for governments to relax the regulations so they can fish unobserved and monitored. But Global Fishing Watch, which is this nonprofit that uses satellite technology to track fishing boats in real time, is now looking at what's really happening. So in the next few weeks, I think we'll have a better idea of how fishing globally has been affected by the economic downturn, by the global lockdown. And I think that it's going to be a very patchy pattern. In some places, there's going to be less fishing, but in some other places where the usual suspects who are closer to pirates than to fishermen, these guys are probably now trying to profiteer from the situation.
So I think we're going to have to close this soon. I could go on and have this conversation for hours because I think it's so interesting. But so here we are on Earth Day. If you sort of think back 10 years ago and to now, and let's put this COVID-19 aside for a moment, what are some of the things that you feel most optimistic about as it relates to, well, not only your work, but just how you see the condition of the ocean as one of the natural systems that we depend upon?
What gives me hope is, well, it's difficult not to talk about COVID, right? But I think that this is the loudest reminder that we are part of nature that we ever had. Is the loudest wake-up call. It is not something that happens somewhere else or in the future. It's happening to you, it's happening to me, it's happening to everybody who has to be confined at home or in worse places. So what gives me hope is that ocean life recovers spectacularly if we give the ocean space. I have seen this with my own eyes in all these places that we have been to that were somehow degraded. And after protection, the fish, the corals, all marine life comes back spectacularly. And I love this example of Cabo Pulmo in Baja California, which I know is one of your favorite places. In the mid-90s, in 1999, we did a study with my colleague Octavia Burto from Mexico, who works at Scripps now. And we went throughout the Sea of Cortez and documented the abundance of marine life. So we counted how many fish were in every place. And Cabo Pulmo was not different from the rest of the Sea of Cortez. It was a pretty overfished place. But in the mid-90s, the local fishermen, they were so fed up with not having enough fish to catch that instead of going after the last fish left, like they usually do, they decided to ask the Mexican government for the creation of a national park, 70 square kilometers with no fishing at all. We returned 10 years later, and the rest of the Sea of Cortez was equally bad. But when we jumped in Cabo Pulmo, we couldn't believe it. The place had come back to pristine in only 10 years. In hundreds of dives during 10 years in the Sea of Cortez, maybe we saw 4 sharks total. Now you can see 20 sharks in one dive at the right time. There are schools of big-eyed trevally that are thousands strong. There are aggregations of 30, 40 leopard groupers, golf groupers, really large ones. It's an extraordinary place. And you know who else is benefiting now? Those visionary fishermen, right? Who now are making much more money from diving inside the reserve. And fishermen are also benefiting from better fishing around the reserve. So that's what gives me hope. These stories of success, where people realized that they had to do something, an area was protected. And then once you protect an area, you don't need to do much. You don't need to water the plants or garden it. The ocean comes back by itself in much faster than what people think.
I've heard you often say, just leave it alone for a period of time, and it will regenerate itself. It doesn't need us to accomplish that. It can do it beautifully on its own. We just need to give it a rest, give it a break. Enric, it was a great pleasure talking to you in this forum. We ought to do this more often. We see each other a lot, but this has been kind of fun, and it's been fun from the perspective of, I hope that whoever's watching this that you've enjoyed it, and if this generates any questions from your perspective, please send them on to me, and I'd be happy to try my best to answer them. And I hope this social distancing and this isolation is over soon, responsibly, for the right reasons. And I'll come up to your roof and we can have a drink. Enric,
I can wait.
He has a lovely place. He and Kristen have a lovely place in Washington, and we've had lots of nice times up there. So thanks a lot.
Well, but when we can go out, I cannot wait to go back in the ocean.
Yes, I can't either. Oh my God, I can't either. Yeah.
Well, happy Earth Day, Sven and everyone.
Well, for everybody who's listening to this, thank you so much for spending your time to do so. I really enjoyed my conversation with Enric, which I always do. I view him as one of the most brilliant and interesting people on the planet. And I hope you all are well, and that we'll see you out there one day soon.